running through dark streets without a sky. A girl lost in a maple city where every sound could kill her. Blind men who hunt with their breath. A masked stranger saves her, but can he be trusted? Doors that open by themselves, walls that breathe, a girl who disappears in the blink of an eye. They must navigate living corridors where your name whispers in the stone, and the drums still beat. It's not about surviving, it's about keeping the humanity in you. I used to work in archives, quiet places, old air, forgotten names. My last assignment took me to a cave system outside a town no one remembered. No signs, no cell signal. A woman dropped me off in silence. She wouldn't look at the entrance. I thought it was just local superstition. Then the light in my headlamp began to flicker, and I heard it, a drum beat, faint but deep, like a slow heartbeat buried beneath stone. When I touched the cave wall, it felt warm, then cold. I turned to leave, but the floor shifted, and the air vanished. It was like falling without motion. And when I opened my eyes, the sky was gone. The ceiling above me stretched forever. The city was made of black stone, silent, twisted buildings rising like broken ribs. No windows, no color, just shadow. And that drum beat, now clearer, echoing across the walls. A boy approached. His name was Jun. He was young, with cloudy eyes and a voice so quiet it trembled. He said the blind would come for me if I moved too loud, breathed too sharp. No one saw in this city. They had given up light to survive. The blind weren't people anymore, he warned. They lived in the cracks, guided by sound. He asked if I could still hear the drums. I nodded. His face fell. That night, they came. I didn't see them. I only felt their approach, cold that moved with shape, breath like dry wind brushing my ears. I ran. The street twisted behind me. My steps rang too clear. Then something grabbed my arm. A man pulled me into the shadows. He wore a black cloak, his mask split with red slits for eyes. His name was Theron. His voice was deep, tired, like stone scraping over itself. He had been here for years. He told me the drums were not warnings. They were locks. They kept something else asleep, something older than the blind. We needed to reach the tower. It stood at the center of the city, hidden by shifting roads. Theron said if we got there, I might return home. We met a girl named Avia. She had pale braids and hands that never stopped moving. Her family vanished in the breathing walls. She wanted answers. She wanted revenge, though she didn't know against what. We entered the breathing walls at dusk. The stone pulsed like flesh. The air felt thick with voices. I heard my name whispered behind every door. One of them opened. What looked out was not human. A smooth, bone-white face, no nose, just two black eyes and a mouth stretched too wide. Theron threw a charm made of ash and thread. The door slammed shut. Avea was gone. We didn't talk, we just kept walking. Jin stopped looking up, the walls pressed closer. My fingers trembled when they brushed the stone. It felt like skin now, alive, hungry. I didn't know if the tower was still ahead or if it had already passed behind us. But the drums haven't stopped. They're slower now, and louder. It's strange how quickly you forget the concept of day when there's no sky. We hadn't seen a sliver of light in what felt like days. Theron walked ahead, always silent, always focused. Jun lagged behind, his fingers brushing the walls like he was trying to stay grounded. I kept thinking about Avia, the way she vanished without a sound, just gone. It didn't feel like death. It felt like erasure. And yet none of us said her name. We passed through a collapsed hallway. The stones had grown soft, almost sponge-like. They compressed beneath our steps, breathing in and out. I tried not to focus on the sounds behind the walls, soft clicking, wet, rhythmic scraping, as if something with too many legs was crawling between the stones. Theron held up his hand. I stopped. Jin froze. The sound had shifted. Now it was ahead of us. We turned into a circular room where the floor curved downward like a drain. In the center stood a figure, not blind, not human. Her eyes were gold and empty. She didn't blink. Her voice was quiet but traveled far. She called herself Marai, said she'd been here longer than memory, said she remembered Theron. He didn't respond. I could tell he knew her. His silence changed shape, hardened. Marai told us the city once had a name, before it was taken, not by war, not by plague, but by something that fed on memory itself. That was what the drums held back. Not a beast, a hunger. She said the walls were stitched with the minds of those who wandered too deep. I believed her. I felt them watching. We moved quickly after that. Theron avoided the west corridor. I asked why. He only said it was folded space, places that bent inward, where time ran sideways. I didn't ask again. Jun was growing pale. His hands trembled. He hadn't slept. He kept muttering names. I thought they were prayers. Later, I realized they were people he had met here, people who were now part of the stone. That night, we camped in a ruined archway. The drums were louder, closer. Theron drew runes on the floor with powder. Mirai didn't sleep. She stared out into the dark, unmoving. When I asked her what she saw, she said the city breathes deeper near the core, where the tower rises without being seen, where the sky still exists but can no longer be touched. I dreamt of a corridor of mirrors. Each one reflected me at a different age. None of them blinked. When I woke, June was gone. No sound. No trail. Just his coat folded at the foot of a breathing wall. I pressed my hand to the stone. It was warm, like skin. I wanted to scream, but the city was always listening. We kept moving. Mirai took June's place at the rear. She never asked questions. She only told stories about what the city was, what it still wanted. I began to feel like I was forgetting things. Names, faces. Even my own handwriting in my journal looked unfamiliar. Theron noticed. He gave me a stone wrapped in thread. Said it helps the mind hold shape. I didn't ask how he knew. The path narrowed. The air was thick. Every breath felt stolen. We passed a corridor where shadows moved against no light. Mirai whispered not to look. I didn't, but I heard my voice calling from inside, younger, softer, asking for help. We reached the edge of a chasm. No bridge, just a drop that faded into nothing. The tower stood beyond it, barely visible, like a shadow drawn in smoke. Theron said the only way forward was faith, not belief, but motion without proof. Mirai stepped back, said she'd stay, that her time had already bent too far, that if she crossed, she might unravel. She touched my shoulder once, cold fingertips, sharp and steady. Then she turned and walked into the corridor of whispering walls. Theron offered his hand. I took it. We stepped into the dark. The drums stopped. Then something else began, a sound beneath sound, and I finally understood. We weren't escaping. We were approaching the thing that had never left. Crossing the void felt like walking on breath. Each step landed softer than the last, and the air thickened as if we were moving through memory instead of space. Theron's grip didn't loosen. His hand was steady, like he'd done this before. The tower stood still on the other side, but I had the sense it had always been behind us, only now deciding to reveal itself. The moment we stepped onto solid ground, the drums stopped. It wasn't silence. It was something beneath silence, like the pause between thoughts. My name felt distant in my head. Theron turned to me and said nothing. We walked toward the base of the tower, its walls marked with shallow carvings that moved when you weren't looking directly at them. Inside, the light was gray and cold. Not natural, like light reflected off dust or memories. There were no stairs, just a hallway that sloped upward. The floor was covered in thin threads, so fine they snapped beneath our steps like whispers. Theron moved with purpose. I followed. Near the second bend, we met a man seated cross-legged on the floor. He looked no older than 30, but his hair was silver and his skin was almost translucent. He smiled gently, said his name was Kier. He had once been a cartographer, not of land, but of time. His voice had a rhythm, like it knew secrets even he didn't understand. Kier told us the tower had no top. It reached only as far as you remembered to climb. The higher you went, the closer you came to the question. Not the answer, he said, the question. I didn't understand, but Theron did. His expression darkened. We left Kier behind. He didn't move, just watched. The further we climbed, the harder it became to recall where we had come from. My thoughts grew hazy. I couldn't remember Avea's face, or June's voice. I held the stone Theron had given me and whispered my name over and over to keep it from slipping away. We entered a chamber lined with glass panels. Inside each panel was a version of me, one smiling, one crying, one standing perfectly still. Theron guided me past them without looking. He said if you stared too long, you'd forget which one you were. He spoke with experience. At the 5th level, we heard footsteps behind us. We turned and saw a woman in white. Her name was Siran. She didn't speak right away, just studied us. Her eyes were dark, but not hollow. She said she was born in this tower. She had never seen the sky, only heard stories of its color. Siran offered to help guide us higher. Theron hesitated, but I said yes. She walked with grace, her fingers brushing the walls like she was reading them. She said each floor was a layer of forgetting. Those who stayed too long in any room lost something: names, memories, meaning. That was the cost of climbing. On the 9th level, Siren paused. She said this was where her brother vanished. His name was Orin. He had opened a door that wasn't meant to be opened. She believed he never left, only became something else. Theron told us not to linger, but when we passed that door, it opened on its own. Inside was a child, alone, silent. His skin glowed faintly, like a reflection of something not present. I stepped forward, and he looked up. His eyes were mine, not similar, exact. I froze. He whispered my name in my voice. Then he closed his eyes and vanished. The air turned cold. Theron pulled me back. We kept climbing. At the top, or what felt like the top, was a circular room with no exits. In the center stood a mirror covered in cloth. Siren said this was where the question lived. Not in the mirror, but in the reflection it denied you. Theron asked if I was ready. I said I wasn't sure. He lifted the cloth. There was no reflection, only a hole, a deep well of stars, not like the sky, more like memory taking shape. I felt myself being pulled forward, but not physically, like my thoughts were unraveling. Theron held my hand tighter. Siren whispered something I couldn't catch, and then it stopped. The tower faded, the walls dissolved.
And we stood alone in a white field of silence. I remembered everything, but something else remembered me back. After the white field faded, we didn't arrive anywhere. We just existed in it. No sky, no ground, no walls. A space that felt like the inside of a breath held too long. Theron stood still beside me. I asked if this was the end. He said it was the last place before choice. I didn't know what that meant. Then it shifted. Light changed. The ground hardened underfoot. Not stone, not dirt. It felt like glass. Ahead, a structure rose, flat, wide, low to the ground. It resembled a temple or a stage, though there were no doors, just an open face and a single curved stair leading downward. Siren appeared behind us without sound. Her presence felt lighter, like she wasn't fully part of here anymore. The stair took us deep. Walls flickered with moving shadows that never matched our own. At the base was a wide chamber. Warm light glowed from cracks in the ceiling. There were people inside, 3 of them. A woman sitting at a pool of water, a man with dark curls carving symbols into a slate wall, and a tall figure wearing a blindfold made of woven leaves. They looked up as we entered, but none of them spoke first. The woman stood and approached. Her name was Morel. She had a voice like still water. She said they were archivists, left behind to remember what the city wanted forgotten. The man was Bram. He nodded to me but never stopped carving. And the blindfolded one, Callan, simply said, "We are the last breath." I didn't ask what that meant. They offered no help, no map, no explanation. Only the invitation to stay and forget. Morel explained that the tower didn't lead home. It led inward. It opened you to the shape beneath your thoughts. And if you went too far, you'd never find your way out because you wouldn't want to. I looked at Theron. He didn't deny it. He looked tired, older than before. That night we stayed. I couldn't sleep. The water near Morel pulsed with quiet sound, like distant whispers. Siren sat beside it for hours. I watched her reflection twist. It no longer matched her movement. I turned away. Bram handed me a slate, told me to carve a memory I didn't want to keep. I held the chisel, but my hands wouldn't move. Every thought felt important. I asked what happens to the carved ones. He said, "They stay here, in stone, so you don't have to." The next day I found Callan standing at the far wall. He told me he once tried to leave, that the further he walked, the more he forgot why he had started. He took off his blindfold briefly. His eyes had no color, only reflections. He said he kept the blindfold to stop himself from following illusions. That's when I understood. This place showed you what you needed to forget, not what you needed to find. Siren was different that day. She asked strange questions. "What color was your door back home? How did your father smell when he hugged you?" I answered. But her eyes kept drifting. She told me she might stay, that the tower was quieter than the world above. That peace didn't need truth. Theron told me we needed to go soon. If we waited longer, we'd lose track of direction. I asked him if he had ever tried to leave this place before. He nodded, said the path always shifted, but he had found anchors before. faces, names, weight of moments. I asked if I was an anchor. He didn't answer. As we prepared to leave, Morel handed me a folded slip of paper. No words, just a charcoal line in the shape of a spiral. She said, "If you find this shape again, turn away." Bram pressed his hand to the stone wall. One of his carvings glowed faintly. I caught a glimpse of my own face etched beside his. When we climbed the stairs again, the light above had changed color. The white had dimmed into silver. A wind moved through the space, but there was no source. Sirens stopped. She said she'd stay after all, that her brother Oren still spoke to her in reflections, that maybe he never left this place, only waited. Theron looked at me. I nodded. We stepped into the silver light, and it blinked. The silver light passed over us like fog through glass. It didn't carry warmth, just weight. When it cleared, we were standing on a shoreline made of flat stones, and the sky above had color again. Not blue, not gray, something in between. Theron scanned the horizon like he expected someone to be waiting. I stayed still, listening. There were no birds, no wind, only the slow rhythm of water touching rock. A woman stood in the distance. Pale cloak, no shoes. Her name was Ellen, and she said we were at the rim, the final boundary between memory and return. I asked if we could go home from here. She said that depended on what part of us we wanted to bring back. That confused me more than comforted me. Theron didn't respond. Ellen led us along the edge where the water reflected nothing. She said the rim held pieces of those who left too quickly. She showed us a stone with a faint outline of a face. I recognized it. June. I touched the edge and felt a sensation like trying to recall a name you once knew well. She told me not to look too long. The longer you searched, the more you forgot what you were searching for. Further down the coast, we came upon a figure building a small tower of balanced shells. His name was Ian. He looked young but spoke as if he'd waited centuries. He asked what truth we carried. Theron told him we carried what remained. Ian said that was enough, that the sea only opens to what isn't trying to escape. I didn't understand what he meant, but the way he said it made me quiet. We stayed the night in a shelter made of driftwood and woven light. Ellen sat by a circle of smooth stones and hummed softly. I fell asleep listening to her voice, but my dreams were full of stairwells that looped back to their first step. In one of them, I passed Saran on a landing. She looked at me, not with sorrow, but with relief. When I woke, Theron was standing in the water, ankle deep, watching the horizon. That morning, Elaine said there would be one final choice, not between staying or leaving, but between remembering or continuing. She explained that remembering pulls you back to who you were, while continuing carries you forward into who you've never been. I asked if it was possible to do both. She said maybe, but not all at once. We walked a long stretch of smooth white beach. Ian stayed behind. Theron was quieter than usual. At one point, he paused and handed me a smooth stone, etched with a spiral. I recognized it, the same shape Morel had given me. I asked if it meant danger. He said no. He said it meant we were close. Eventually, the sky folded. That's the only way I can describe it. A part of the horizon bent downward, not like sunset, but like a page being turned. Ellen stepped forward and told me to walk through it without expectation. She said expectation is a tether, and tethers don't belong in the next place. I looked back at Theron. He said nothing, just nodded. I walked through the fold. On the other side was a city, empty, familiar, my own world, but still, like it had been paused for years. The air felt thinner, my body heavier. I looked at my hands and they were mine, but something was missing. I couldn't tell what. There were no people, just echoes. I walked past a bakery I remembered. The scent of flour hovered but didn't move. I entered my old apartment building. My room was untouched, but there was a journal on the table. It was mine. Only I didn't remember writing the last few entries. Theron's name appeared once. So did Ellen, but the rest was scribbled out. And at the very end, there was a question, but I couldn't read it. I stayed in the apartment for a long time. It smelled faintly of paper and dust, like no one had touched anything in years. The light through the window didn't shift. It stayed pale, frozen. Outside, the city stretched into silence. I opened drawers, checked cabinets, flipped through old notes I didn't remember writing. Each word felt like it belonged to someone, almost me, but not quite. I tried reading the journal again. The last page was still there, the question still unreadable. The phone on the kitchen wall rang, once, then stopped. I walked over and picked it up. Nothing. No dial tone, just breathe on the other end. I placed it back gently. My reflection in the microwave didn't blink. That was when I knew I wasn't fully back. I left the building and walked the block. Familiar signs, familiar corners, but no people. I passed a flower shop with fresh petals on the ground. No one inside. I reached the old tram station. A girl sat on the bench. She looked about 20, hair dark, eyes gray-blue like storm clouds. Her name was Nira. She smiled when she saw me, said I was late, though she wasn't waiting for anyone. She asked if I remembered the ferry. I said no. She said that was good. Some memories should only come back when you're ready to leave again. I asked where she lived. She said here. Everyone lives somewhere that doesn't move unless they do. Then she offered me something small wrapped in cloth. I unwrapped it. A pendant, shaped like a spiral. The same one again. We walked for a while. Nira talked about the city as if it had moods. She said it used to whisper at night, but now it only echoed. She stopped near the edge of the river and pointed. Across the water, a figure stood under a crooked lamppost. His coat was long, face obscured. She called him Lior, said he was a watcher, not someone dangerous, just someone who stays when others leave. I waved. Lior didn't move. Nira told me he used to speak, but once he answered someone's question out loud, he lost the need to talk. She said that's what the city does. It takes your weight piece by piece until you float too far to return. I asked why she was still here. She paused, said maybe she was waiting for someone to ask the wrong thing. Later that evening, I returned to the apartment. My journal had changed. The scribbled words on the last page had rearranged themselves. This time, it was a sentence. It read, "What if you've already left, but the memory of leaving is what's keeping you here?" I closed the book slowly. I heard movement above me, not footsteps, just a shift in the ceiling, like someone pacing one floor higher. I went to the stairwell, climbed carefully. The hallway above was darker, colder. Doors lined the corridor, none marked. At the very end, one stood ajar. I approached. Inside was a boy seated in a chair facing the window. He looked familiar. His name was Oren. I knew that without asking. He turned slightly but didn't meet my eyes. Said he didn't need to. Said I'd already seen enough. I asked how long he'd been here. He said long enough to forget what waiting felt like. He told me Theron had passed through. Left a message. I asked what it was. Oren stood, opened his palm. A spiral, drawn in dust. Said nothing more. Then he walked to the corner of the room and faded. Not suddenly, just gently, as though he was stepping back into something he had never left. I returned downstairs. Nira was gone. Her pendant lay on the table beside a folded page from my journal. I opened it. No words, just a small circle with an arrow pointing inward. I held it in my hand for a long time. Outside, the lamppost flickered. Lior was no longer standing there, and the city for the first time exhaled. The exhale faded, but something in the air shifted. A stillness followed. Not peace, not tension, just a subtle awareness that things had rearranged themselves. I stood by the window for a long time. The street remained empty. The light hadn't changed. Time here wasn't steady. It moved in loops or pauses or quiet rewinds. The apartment felt like mine, but smaller. My shadow reached too far across the floor. I kept the spiral pendant in my pocket. I didn't know what it meant anymore, but it grounded me. The journal on the table was gone. In its place was a folded piece of paper, and it held a name I didn't recognize, Khan, and a phrase, "He still remembers you." That was all. I stepped outside. The city sounded different, not louder, just more awake. I walked toward the northern tram line, a place I never used when I lived here. The sky above it was fractured like glass, reflecting no stars. A figure waited near the rails. Not Lior. This man had no coat, just plain gray clothes and a bag filled with folded maps. His face was calm, eyes clear. He said his name before I asked. Olin. Said we'd met before in a place neither of us remembered correctly. I didn't argue. Something about him felt like deja vu stretched too thin. Olin walked with me through the industrial quarter. Rusted signs, cracked glass, buildings leaning inward. He spoke about echoes, how some of them aren't sound, but memory trying to return. He said some people leave footprints in places they never stood. I asked if that was what I had become. He didn't answer, just pointed to a door marked with the spiral. Inside was a corridor of old office spaces. Each room was locked except one. A woman waited there. She was drawing on the floor with chalk, long looping arcs that connected into a spiral so large it touched every wall. Her name was Ara. She looked young, but her voice carried years. She said she used to be someone else, but the city had softened her edges until she forgot where the line ended. Ara asked if I'd heard my own voice in other rooms. I told her about the boy in the tower, the one with my eyes. She nodded, said reflections leak, that every thought we suppress tries to grow roots in places we can't watch. She motioned for me to stand in the center of the chalk spiral. I did. For a moment, nothing happened. Then something clicked inward, not a sound, more like a memory slotting back into place. I saw myself at 8 years old drawing spirals in the corner of a classroom. I saw Theron placing a hand on my shoulder in a place that no longer existed. I saw Ellen speaking words I hadn't heard yet. And then the image cracked. The light shifted. I stumbled backward. Ara steadied me. She said the spiral doesn't reveal truth. It reveals where you stored it. We left that building together. Olin was gone. Ara said he always disappears when someone sees what they weren't supposed to. We walked to the edge of the canal. The water was rising. She asked if I was ready to leave. I said I didn't know what leaving meant anymore. She handed me a folded map. It didn't show roads or buildings, just spirals, interlocking, coiling inward. At the center was a blank space labeled, "You were here once." She told me the only way forward was to remember without naming, that some truths only survive in silence. Back at the apartment, the light was different, warmer but distant. The pendant in my pocket had cracked down the middle. The spiral was splitting. I opened the window. The city outside had changed again. The tram line was gone. A field stretched in it. A field